am Nicole Khalil, and I'm more than a little excited to bring you the best, most listened to episodes of This Is Woman's Work in 2023. I love doing this episode at the end of each year as it gives me the opportunity to reflect and celebrate all the amazing content, guests, and learnings that happen throughout the year. I also love this episode for you because it's a great way to highlight the episodes that resonated the most. And if you're new to our show, serves as a really good starting point, because if you don't like the episodes in our top 5, this is probably not the right podcast for you. And that's okay, because this show isn't meant for everyone. Which begs the question, who is it meant for? Well, most likely you identify as a woman, though about 10% of our listeners are men or non-binary. And even though I believe a majority of the topics are relevant regardless of gender, it is a podcast called This Is Woman's Work. So 90% women is not all that surprising. You likely work, whether that's inside the home as a full-time parent or outside the home where you get paid for your work, or you somehow are juggling both. You're interested in building meaningful relationships personally and professionally, and the status quo either bores you or it pisses you off. You've probably never fit into the traditional definition of anything, let alone what it means to be a woman. I'm guessing you have big dreams, an extra dose of ambition, and want to excel in the things that matter most to you. And you probably struggle with perfectionism, overthinking, and comparison. You might be a bit of a people pleaser, even if others don't see that in you. You probably say yes to more than you should. There's probably an area of your life where you feel or show up as super confident, but that confidence doesn't always translate to the other aspects of your life. You dream big, but you're also your own harshest critic. Is any of this sounding familiar? Do you feel called out or personally attacked? It's because I know about all of this, because I'm one of you. And as your host, I do advocate for women, but not at the expense of men or any other gender. We're redefining what it looks like, feels like, and means to be doing woman's work in today's world. The answer, by the way, of what woman's work is whatever feels true, right, and authentic for you. Whatever lights you up from the inside, do that. You sharing your gifts is woman's work, and you are the decider. In its simplest form, it could be said that choice is what I mean when I say this is woman's work. And anyone of any gender is welcome to join us. So here's how this episode is going to look. I'll reveal each of the top 5 episodes from 2023 by sharing a little bit about the guest or something from behind the scenes. I'll share insider information you wouldn't hear or couldn't know just by tuning in, and then you'll get a chance to listen to a few minutes from that episode. And feel free to circle back and listen to the whole thing if it's speaking to you. The link to the full version of each of them is in show notes. And at the end of our episode, I'll leave you with some final thoughts, and I'll sign off as I always do. So without further delay, I'll bring you our top 5 episodes of 2023. Except that I've already lied to you, because I'm going to do an honorable mention for the episode that came in at the number 6 spot. I have to do this because what you don't know, what you can't possibly know just by listening in, is that our 6th most downloaded episode of the year features a guest who had never done a podcast before in her life. Think about that for a second. It was her first time preparing, recording, and having a podcast released. And it's a top 6 episode on a top 1.5% globally downloaded podcast. She could have easily said, I'm not ready. She could have practiced on smaller podcasts first. She could have waited until she felt confident, like so many of us do. Or she could have gotten stuck thinking about all the worst case scenarios that might have happened. But not Kate Tracy. Nope. My girl said yes, got into action, chose courage in the face of nerves and confidence when she felt doubt. And I think you'll agree that what happened was just about as close to best case scenarios she could have hoped for. She crushed it. She sounded like a pro, gave valuable tips and information, promoted the crap out of it, and even reached out to me after the fact to let me know that she'd caught the podcasting bug and asked if I'd introduced her to a few other podcast hosts, which I gladly did. So when you see Kate Tracy on many future podcasts, remember, it started here first with an epic demonstration of what I mean when I talk about choosing confidence before the feeling catches up. Coming in at number 6 is episode 160 on motivation with Kate Tracy.
And when we think about internal versus external motivators, we think about the study done by Edward and Deci, and this was done in 85. And if you're like me, you immediately are like, oh, it was only 20 years ago because I'm stuck in early 2000s. I just can't age past that. But, now it's, 40 years ago. But what was interesting about the study is it really toppled everything we thought about motivation on its head. Prior to that, it was pay bonuses and trips and all of these things we threw at people, the lollipop, the bribery to get them to do their job or get our kids to do what we needed to do. And what they found was that didn't work. That actually was not a motivating factor. It might be temporarily one, those external motivators, and when we think about it in a personal sense, maybe it's I want to, I just run an extra mile or get up a little earlier, whatever it might be, that's going to make the difference and whatever that thing is I'm reaching for. But what they really found was it was internally, what was their why? Why were they doing what they were doing? Did they have a purpose behind what they were doing? And those who had a purpose behind why they were doing the thing they were doing or felt connected to it were more likely to outperform. And there were, I'm talking about purpose right now, but there's really 3 pieces to that internal puzzle. And that's having the autonomy to do it, whatever the it is, and also the skills and the mastery to actually do it well and build that confidence around really knowing and trusting in themselves they could do it in connection to that broader purpose and that broader why.
So now, we will move on to the 5th most listened to episode of 2023. My guest was introduced to me by a mutual friend and A+ financial advisor, Chantel Bonneau. And anytime she recommends anyone or anything to me, I know it's going to be great. And this was no exception. Kristen Lasanti joined me to share 4 of the 10 truths of what she calls radiant change, which is clearly better than regular change, on episode 129. And not only did she deliver a masterclass on navigating change, she has since become a friend, someone I admire, and my go-to expert when I find myself resisting or fearing change. Coming in as the 5th most downloaded episode of 2023, apparently we were all experiencing change this year, whether we wanted those changes or not, here is my incredible conversation with Kristen Lasanti.
I think the first thing to know about change is that it is not going to be linear, right? It is going to have its ups and downs, particularly one very major down, which comes at the beginning. So think about it as an arc, right? We have a high of our optimism and our maybe even if we're receiving a change that's happening to us, there's that sense of like, okay, like there's an energy peak. And then there's a dip, right? And so just knowing that that's going to happen, right? And that that's a part of it. You said it at the very beginning, change is inevitable. And I think that that's also really important to remember. It's something that we all know, change is going to happen. Everything is always changing. Everything will change. Nothing stays the same. There's going to be the change that we want, right? We want women's rights, right? We want a society that is moving in the direction of anti-racism. From an organizational perspective, we might want to merge 2 companies for greater scale and impact. From a relational perspective, we may want to build more intimacy with a partner, right? So those are the changes we want. And then we're always receiving the changes we don't want. We're receiving societally a global pandemic. We are receiving as an organization the impact of the Great Resignation, right? Relationally, maybe there's a bad breakup. Personally, internally in our lives, maybe there's a health diagnosis that we have to grapple with or navigate. So we know intellectually that there is always going to be change, but somehow it manages to surprise us like every time, right? So simply opening ourselves up to the inevitability of change, I think is really important. This is a lifelong practice. This is actually the first of what I call my 10 truths of radiant change, right? I have a whole list that is based in my experience and a lot of brilliant thinkers who came before me around the topic of change. The inevitability is the first one. I think the other thing that I coach my clients around with the inevitability of change is the thing that we can choose is the mindset we're bringing to a change. And I'll often use the model of, am I in a to me mindset or am I in a through me mindset? So when I'm in to me, and I often will find myself there, the story in my mind is this is happening to me. I am not responsible. I have no power and there's nothing I can do, right? And it's a very depleting place to be. On the other hand, through me, when I'm in that mode, maybe I didn't choose the change, right? But what power do I have to shape the arc of this particular change? What can I do to show up in a way that is authentic to who I am and that is connected to some sort of value or vision that I have for this change? There's always something that we can do.
I mean, come on. The to me versus through me mindset shift is an absolute game changer. And that episode is chock full of mic drop moments just like that. Moving forward to the number 4 spot is my personal favorite episode of the year. Listen, I'm proud of each and every one, and I learned something new in every recording, and this episode blasted my mind. I've listened to it several times. If someone shook me awake in the middle of the night and demanded that I share my favorite episode, it would be this one. Now, I don't know why anyone would do that, and it'd be a very strange 911 call. But all that to say, it resonated with me on a deep and personal level. I'll also share something that most listeners don't know, and my guests are almost always surprised about because I know most other hosts don't do it this way. But I always bullet point my opening and closing remarks before we record the show. So what you hear me say as I open and close a show is predetermined before I ever even get to hear what my guest is going to say. And I go through it live with them, listening in, so they get a sense of what direction I'd like to take the topic, a bit about my style. And it often gives them permission to curse because I've likely done it already by the time I ask a question. And it makes us feel like we're in a podcast versus just starting with a question and going back to re-record the intro and closing after the fact, as most hosts do. Nothing wrong with that. I just do it differently. But what's really fascinating is how often the closing remarks that I've predetermined end up lining up beautifully with what we end up talking about. It feels like a moment where the universe is perfectly aligned, and it often gives me goosebumps. And it feels like we were meant to have this conversation. That happened on this episode so much that it brought tears to my eyes. So without further delay, an episode the universe conspired to bring to you and to me too, about a topic that I believe every woman, every person would benefit from listening to. It's episode 147 on people pleasing and being needy with Mara Glatzel.
Well, I think the first thing is these are my needs, and my needs are my responsibility.
That's empowering. Woo!
That's empowering, and that's important because when we go to that shadow side of needy, it's when we're trying to outsource our needs to everybody around us in increasingly intense ways because we want to matter, we want to be seen, we want to be acknowledged. And I have been that needy person, certainly. And in looking back in my own life, I'm able to see that during those moments, I was trying to outsource something to somebody else that I wasn't able or willing to acknowledge or take responsibility for myself. And this doesn't mean that we're islands. This doesn't mean we are hypersocial species. We need one another. But my needs begin and end with me. So I have it. I ask for it. You respond, whether or not you have the capacity or the desire to meet me in my need. And after your response, if it's a no, especially, that need remains with me. Then I get to get curious and creative about how else I might be able to meet that need, or how might I be able to look at that differently, or who else might be available to meet that need. Too often we leave the need with the other person and we say, oh, they said no, so I'm shit out of luck, right? Too bad for me. But once we realize that our needs are our responsibility, and also when we realize that expecting one person in our lives to meet all of our needs is a setup in and of itself, then we can take our needs from that conversation and ask ourselves, what now? There are things that I do with my sisters, but not with my partner. There are things I do with friends that I don't do with my sisters, right? Being able to look at your life and think about, what might I want? What might I need? And maybe I don't have a group of people or a person to do that thing I want to do with. That instead of making that everyone else's problem or my problem, then the question is, well, how do I meet people who are interested in the same kinds of things that I am? And so I think this piece is empowering, that I get to choose. I get to do with my needs what I want. And that doesn't mean I don't need help, but it does mean that it doesn't live in somebody else's hands, as so many of us were raised to believe.
I'm going to give you a second to recover from that one. And if you want to hit pause and go listen to the full episode, I don't blame you. And the link is in show notes, and we'll be here when you get back. Okay. In the third spot of most listened to episodes of 2023 is an episode that took many months to happen. It started as a suggestion from a friend that I immediately ignored. I mentioned it to Nikki, who produces the show and handles all things podcast related. So all I need to do is prep and show up to record with these amazing guests. I mentioned it to her, but I positioned it almost like it was a joke. Like, can you believe this ridiculous idea? Except that backfired because she could believe that ridiculous idea. So I then proceeded to drag my feet, pretending to not be able to figure out the logistics or how I would make it work. It was probably about 9 months from idea to release. So clearly I moved real fast in putting my big girl pants on, right? Episode 144 features me and my husband and partner in life, Jay, as the guests, and is hosted by our dear friend and master coach, Lynn Casaletto. We talk about partnership, more specifically, our partnership and how we make it work and how we do our best to set aside gender stereotypes and expectations and create a partnership that works for both of us, for our family, and for our careers. It's an episode I'm personally proud of, and I think one day when she's older, our daughter JJ can listen to and hopefully appreciate the love, the respect, and the intention we put into our relationship and our family. I mean, obviously that'll happen after the teenage years where she's mortified about how thoroughly embarrassing and uncool her parents are. But in the meantime, here are her parents, hosted by Lynn Casaletto, talking about partnership.
You all, I want to ask you about something that, Nicole, you, for the past 3 years, you've kind of dripped on us. And I think it's so special. And for those of you who maybe haven't heard about this, the planning, like the family planning piece that you all do, there's so much intentionality behind this. Can you just share for the listeners who may not be familiar?
So first, I think we need to come up with a better name, because sometimes people hear it and they think that we're planning to have a family or something like that.
We're not having any more kids.
We're not having any more kids. That is not being planned. So listeners, if you have an idea of like a really cool name that lets people know what we're talking about, I would welcome it. But ultimately what it is Jay and I purposefully and strategically set time aside twice a year. We're actually in our mid-year planning retreat right now. You can't see me, but I'm in a robe. We're in a hotel room together. We went out to dinner last night. We did all of our professional planning we each did, and our personal finances already. We're going to go into relationship goals. We're going to go into calendar planning, and we're going to go into our family, like parenting goals over the next few days. But ultimately, the concept is we spent a lot of time doing business planning and being taught how to do that and teaching other people how to do that. And it just sort of occurred to us like, hey, we actually know what we're doing as it relates to business planning. Is there a way we can apply this to our family? And so we came up with an agenda, and then we realized we had a lot to talk about. And if we're going to do it, we might as well make it fun. So twice a year, we go somewhere for at least a night, sometimes 2 or 3 nights. There is almost always some element of fun, dinners, spa, blah, blah, blah. But we have an agenda, which is available on my website for free to anybody who wants to have it. And that's the agenda we used. I pulled it up yesterday. It forces us to have these conversations. It forces us to be proactive. It forces us to have dialogue around these really important things. And I will tell you, the women that I've talked to that do this say the same thing that I experience. I never feel more connected. I never feel more grounded in who we are and what we're up to. And I never feel more proud of us as a family and a couple than I do when we do these. So we do this twice a year, and then we have a quarterly checkpoint. And once a month, we get together and do a few logistical things. But I can't say strongly enough, I don't think our marriage has ever been in danger. So I can't say that it's saved our marriage, but it's prevented us from ever being in a position where I think our marriage would be in danger. So
Yeah, I mean, some thoughts to add there is when we first did it, I'll say it was more of Nicole's idea, like, hey, I think we should do this. And, here's some things that I think would be super helpful. And going into it, I had the thought of like, yeah, this will be fun. Let's go away. We can talk through some stuff. But I didn't really know how impactful it would be. So like going into it, I was open to it, but now I really look forward to it. Right. So like Nicole said, it gives us the opportunity to reconnect on a lot of things, right? On our business, on our personal goals. Some things are very tactical, right? We go through calendar and we go through finances and stuff like that. And then, Lynn, you had asked questions around just like different challenges that we might have, or, nuances or pet peeves. And I think this also just gives us the venue to get ahead of a lot of things, or even just kind of get some things on the table that may have been bubbling up that, we didn't catch on a day-to-day or when things happen. So I think if we didn't do these, there probably are some things that maybe would go unsaid, or that would continue to compound or create some resentment over time. And I think that, again, this just allows us to say, like, when you were working a little bit extra here, here's how I felt, right? Or, in that situation that happened, like, here's maybe a way that we could handle that differently next time. But I think it just really allows us to be way more proactive with what we want to accomplish versus being reactive and not being on the same page.
Of all the things I'm most proud of, and I'm proud of a lot, my partnership with Jay is always at the top of the list. So I'm grateful we recorded that episode, even if it took me many months to be willing to get that personal. And we recorded it when I had a massive head cold, so I sound extra sexy. Okay. An interesting thing to consider about our number 2 most listened to episode of 2023 is that our guest's area of focus, of expertise, is the same as mine. Yes, we invited a guest on our show to talk about the topic I talk about all the friggin' time. I literally wrote a book about it, which begs the question, why would we bring someone else on to talk about my topic? Well, first, because I don't own the topic of confidence, and I believe thousands of us could be out there talking about confidence all day long, and we'd still only scratch the surface of the impact that it could have. And also, because I believe in different perspectives and different voices, because I know I'm not the right fit for everyone. And lastly, because I refuse to see other women as competition, and I know from experiences like this one that we make each other better. Meg Burton-Tudman joined me to talk about confidence, and what we got was a beautiful expansion of the topic I love and am so passionate about. And I got a new friend and collaborator who I'm grateful to know is out there doing this incredible work. Confidence comes in at the number 2 spot of the year with episode 124, Mind, Body, Soul, and Confidence with Meg Burton-Tudman.
Sure. I'm going to start at the end and then we'll go back to how you do it, because I think if you can experience that ease and that flow, you're in it. So start to take note of when things appear like, oh, that came out of nowhere. It didn't. You created it. You're responsible for that. But start to pay attention to what comes easily, what comes naturally. What are you so passionate, so good at that it doesn't feel like work? It feels like you're in your zone of genius and you're humming along and just feeling really, really high vibrational. And the contrast of that is when we're doing things and we feel like either we're stuck in place and not making any kind of forward progress or even taking advantage of momentum, or we're on the hamster wheel where we're doing the same thing over and over again and we are bored out of our mind and we're not creating anything, in that nothing is happening for us, or it's the same thing day after day after day. So some ways that we can get into that alignment, again, cultivating those moments of peace where we can get out of our head. That intuition is so helpful and that's going to serve us well. The inner critic, not so much, right? That judge, that trash is not gonna serve us well. So moments where we can pause and get out of our head. For me, that involves deep breathing. It involves meditation. All of this, though, is really bio-individual. So what works for me might be different than what works for you. So I encourage all of our friends listening to start to experiment and figure out what you actually like, because you're much more likely to stick with it and experiment with it if it's something you enjoy. So again, breath work and meditation have been really instrumental for me. It's part of my business. So obviously I have a lot of belief in that. I also think taking responsibility for ourselves. So getting to a place where we can stop blaming others for what's happening for us and instead start to take action and start to take responsibility for our own lives, for our own realities, and to notice these are the thoughts that serve me well. These are the beliefs that are mine, that I really, truly at my core value. And these are the inspired actions that feel like they're going to create what I'm looking to create, what I'm seeking to experience. I also think finding opportunities to reconnect with ourselves. And for me, this is yoga, but I've seen a host of other things that allow us to create that mind-body connection and also pull in, the soul and the spirit. It might be eating a healthy diet, or it might be spending time with really high vibrational friends that are, challenging you in a really positive way and that are calling you out on, thoughts or comments that really aren't aligned with who they know your highest self to be. And then getting clear on what you actually enjoy. I think as adults, especially as women, we have so many responsibilities that we tend to forget what actually brings us joy, what allows us to have fun and to experience that high energy. And so starting to experiment and getting clear on what is it that I'm passionate about? What is it that I can do on a regular basis? So this isn't like, oh, I do that once a year. Oh, I do that once a month, right? These can be tiny, tiny, seemingly insignificant choices that we make throughout each day, but that really are having a huge ripple effect on how we feel and are helping us to create that alignment of mind, body, and soul.
All right, friends, you guessed it. That brings us to the #1 most listened to episode in 2023. The popularity of this episode was no surprise and features a woman who needs no introduction. I mean, you'd have to be living under a rock to not have heard of Peloton. And you're either obsessed with her tread classes already or you're about to be. Kirsten Ferguson coaches us through walks, runs, hikes, and strength training, but it's her intention-setting Sunday walks that hooked me. In these 60-minute walks, she shares affirmations and stories so that we can set our intention for the week, and it's basically the workout equivalent of going to church. She was recommended to me by someone from my community, but I can't for the life of me remember who it was. So if it was you, I'm eternally grateful. I was taking her classes a few times a week, and after sobbing in one of those intention-setting walks, I thought, I have to get her on the show. So I reached out thinking it was a long shot, and I guess the saying is true. You only miss 100% of the shots you don't take. And I was thrilled when she said yes. She was recovering from surgery and had a little extra time, which I was more than happy to take advantage of. And then I proceeded to over prepare and attempted to show up at my very best, which was unnecessary because Kirsten was as down to earth, generous, caring, and real as she is in her classes. And now I'm an even bigger fan of hers than I was before. And I'm sure you will be too. In the number one spot with all her energy, wisdom, and encouragement is episode 154, Affirmation Roulette with Peloton's Kirsten Ferguson. The grass is greener where I am. I'm not worried about your yard because I'm focused on watering my own. Take it away.
Ooh, I love that affirmation. And why it speaks so much to me is I find that no matter where I am, whether it is being a mom or working at Peloton or even at my time in corporate America, you can always get caught in comparison. You're always looking at somebody that is in your mind doing it better or somebody that has it all figured out. Side note, they don't have it figured out. We're all just trying to figure it out ourselves. But I always say in class, like comparison is the thief of joy. And there's a reason why you are doing what you're doing. They were called to do that. Clap for them. That's amazing. But you were called to do where you are, where your feet are, and really focusing on that. It's not easy. It is really challenging to put the blinders on. And it's also, I find, challenging to know the difference between comparison and motivation. It is a really thin line because you can watch somebody doing something and that could really inspire you to want to do more and be more. But then you can also get caught in comparison where you're like, wow, look at that person. And then you see lack in yourself. And so I say the grass is greener right where your water it is, because what are you doing to empower yourself where you're at? And focusing more on that and worrying less about what anybody or anything is doing. I think that is so crucial and important to anybody's growth. And so that is why, that one really speaks to me and still speaks to me to this day. Like, even when you're saying these affirmations out loud, it speaks to me today, right where I'm at, like as a reminder,
Mm-hmm.
That's what I love about affirmations too. It's not just for that one moment. It's going back to them again and then being like, oh, wow. Yes. Reminder. Thank you. Water where I'm at. Focus less on that person.
So often I'll hear something and think, oh, yes, I get to learn this lesson again. Still, right? It's not one and done. Yeah.
It's not one and done. And like I said, it'll hit you in different moments. As a mom to two young girls, and I see moms crushing it at school and volunteering and all the things. And I'm just like, man, I am really failing at this thing. Or, you just start to negative talk, like you spoke about, what a head trash, I think is what you called it. I call mine the gremlin. But you start to get in that comparison mode, and that's not going to serve you or the people that you're working with, so focusing on where you're at and what you can do in this moment, I think is so crucial.
Okay, well, there you have it, friends. 4 years of podcasting, over 170 episodes, and I feel like we just keep getting better and better. And a massive thank you for joining me on this journey, whether it's your first episode or if you've been with me for the long haul. If I could ask you one small favor, if you listen on Apple Podcasts, scroll down and leave a review. You don't even have to write words, just hit the stars. Or if you listen on Spotify, all you can do is hit the stars, so that works too. All 5 of them, please. That 3 seconds makes a world of difference to me and for our show. Up to this point, I've treated This Is Woman's Work as a passion project, and I've been touched by how it's grown organically over the years because of you, our listeners, showing up each week and sharing with your friends and family. In 2024, I'm doubling down on this passion, and we're bringing so much more to this project. We've got the audiobook version of Validation is for Parking being released each Monday, some exceptionally good episodes and some pretty big guests around the corner, and some great opportunities for you to join me in doing woman's work and practicing ampleship. which is the public support and recognition of women. As we close out one year and walk into all the possibilities and hopes of a new one, I'm sure you're asking yourself questions like, what do I want? What do I really want? What's the experience I'm looking for? What truly matters? What do I want more of? What do I want less of? Who or what do I want to tell to fuck off? Okay, maybe it's just me that asks myself that. Who do I want to give to? What do I have to give? And how can I take better care of myself and the people I love? There are so many questions, but for all of them, there's one constant. You are the decider. So plan big plans, dream big dreams, and risk big risks. My love to you and yours, and I wish you joy and oh so much confidence in the new year. Let's all trust ourselves firmly and boldly. Let's take care of ourselves and each other and get after what matters most. Thank you for joining me as we all do woman's work.